everything, the word says. To everything. Let me say it again. To everything, there is a season. There's a season to everything. Jesus said it came to pass, it never came to stay. The songwriter used to say that trouble don't last always. So to everything, there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. Life without purpose is time without meaning. If you're taking notes, that'd be a good thing to write down. Life without purpose is time without meaning. It is useless to keep track of time if there is no end toward which you are moving. Time is a temporary interruption in eternity. Time is a temporary interruption in eternity. Every Kairos is a Chronos, but not every Chronos is a Kairos. The Greeks had three distinct concepts of time: aion, A-I-O-N, and Chronos, and Kairos. Aion represents everlasting eternity of the cosmos. It's a duration without measure. In other words, it's a duration of time where there is no measure. There is no measure to time because it's eternity. And Chronos symbolizes a clock time that helps people understand Chronos time, or a measure of time. And Kairos represents divine supernatural intervention, or a season, or an opportune time. So let's go back and look at this verse again. To everything there is a season. So to everything there is a Chronos time. There is a Kairos time. And so then there's an Adnot time, but all seasons are in eternity. And so to everything there is a season, then a time for every purpose under heaven. The minute something falls from heaven into the realm of the planet, into the physical world or the material world, it fulfills time. The moment something falls from heaven into the realm, into the physical realm, or the material realm where you and I live every day, it fulfills time. Do you understand that? Okay, so in the book of Galatians, chapter 4, and 4 are these words: but when the fullness of time had come. So in other words, whenever God releases something from heaven or the throne room of God, and it enters into the realm where you and I live, it brings a fullness of all time. In other words, something miraculous. There's a supernatural intervention that comes into time, and it subdues time. It placed time under arrest. In other words, the purpose of God then fulfills what it is God released it for. So in other words, Chronos time cannot hinder it. Did you hear what I said to you? And so 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11:30 cannot hinder when God decides to step out of eternity and step into time. And when he steps into time, all of the purpose of who he is now fills all things. I'll give you an example. When I got born again, born from above, and Jesus' purpose and promise for my life stepped into time. So then what happened? At that point, death had to back off. what would take my life prematurely had to cease. Are you listening to me? So I want you to know that the things that the devil meant for your destruction had to cease the moment the promise stepped into time. Now, if you believe that, you'll stop crying. If you really believe that, you'll rise above the place where you are. Why? Because the promise of God stepped into Chronos time and brought Kairos time, a supernatural divine intervention to change that situation you're in. Why? Because all of a sudden, God's promise, God's purpose for your life now rises up a standard against the enemy. It says when the enemy comes in, like a flood. God is the flood. Like a flood, God raises up a standard against it. Are you listening to me? Sure you are. So the standard now is lifted, and the hell that was coming against your life now has to cease. Why? Because Chronos stepped into time, and it fulfilled it. Did you get that? So when you step out of Chronos and you step into time, that's where sickness, death, hard time, brokenness, lack, poverty, all that now comes into your life. Why? Because you shifted your position. So if you don't like it, shift back. Remember, if you're going through hell, what? Don't stop. If you're catching hell, guess what? Don't hold it. Shift back. Come on, stand up on your feet just for a moment. Just for a moment. So, because you've been in Chronos time, what time is Chronos? I got my little, just a second, stand up. What'd you say? It's 9:51. So I got my clock. So now, if we don't like what you've been going through in the presence of God, guess what we're going to do? This is Chronos over here. And so everybody knows this is right towards the door. You're going to shift that way. All right? If you shift that way, we want you to come up to the front. Okay? Everybody's going to shift towards that door. All right? So we're going to, here's Chronos time. This is where all your hell is, all your lack, all your debt, everything that don't like you is over here. This is Chronos time at 9:51 and a half. Okay? So we're going to shift over here to Kairos time. Okay? You got that? Hold up. Before we shift, I'm going to get my friend. Come up here, Keith. Come here. That's my friend. I know he hates this. He's like, I can hear him now. All right. Keith's going to give us the countdown. So, Keith, you count to 3. We're going to shift. Get out of my way. We're going to shift. So, you count us down, Keith.
3, 2, 1.
Shift. Thank you, Keith. You did it so good. Give Keith a hand. All right, you may be seated. Now, Keith, you did that good. I thought you were going to say 1. Who counts that way? Heaven does. Thank you, Keith. So I want you to understand how God sees it. God says you can stay over there in Chronos time and you're going to get just what everybody else gets. As you know, my wife was up here and she talked about China. Now, China's in Chronos time. Okay? And so China can't affect you because you're living over here in Kairos time. You're living over here in divine intervention. You're living over here in the promise of God. You're living over here where all of heaven is for you and not against you. You're living over here where by his stripes you are healed. That's where you're living at. So now remember, healing was a secondary measure. God always had divine health for you. So healing is a secondary measure. Divine health is where God wants you to live. So when we say be healed, we want you to move from Chronos to Kairos. Okay? So when you leave this planet, then you're going to be in Adnan. Now,